The following podcast does not constitute legal advice.
Yeah, what he said.
Thanks for downloading the Martial Secrets podcast with martial artists and authors, Lawrence Kane and Chris Wilder. Now here are Lawrence and Chris.
Welcome to Martial Secrets. I'm your co-host, Chris Wilder.
And I'm Lawrence Kane.
Well, you're a co-host, aren't you?
Well, I am, but, I wouldn't want to be redundant by saying co-host because there's only two of us.
Oh, good point.
Yeah, there you go. So, we're honoring the intelligence of our audience, and I'm sure that they are worthy of it.
Before we get into the subject that you're going to cover today, Lawrence, which is fighting to the goal, I want to tell you what happened to me earlier today. Actually last night, I called Rory Miller, and I thought he was on Pacific Coast time, and he wasn't. It was like very late for him. Okay, I'll talk to you later, don't worry. So I think, when he gets back, we're going to have a conversation. It's not anything that's really that important. So the phone rings this morning, and it's him, and we're talking, and he goes, well, I'm at lunch break right now at this seminar that I'm doing. And it's like, oh, okay, well, you didn't have to. He's like, no, it's cool, man. I got time. What's up? So we start chatting, and he's just chatting along, and pretty soon I'm starting to hear this tack, back, tack stuff, and in the background, and I go, Rory, what's going on? He goes, I'm stick fighting with somebody right now.
That is so. Well, remember, Rory's the guy who took a prisoner down and handcuffed him with one hand holding coffee in the other one.
Yeah.
And didn't even know he did it until afterwards. So,
well, we just stepped into a complete Princess Bride moment right there.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, today, Lawrence, you're going to take us through fighting to the goal. Tell us what we're going to learn. Tell us what we learned.
Okay, so some of the topics. Let me back up. If you're going to fight, and we've talked previously about intent means opportunity preclusion. We've talked about there's other podcasts that have been done about predatory and social violence and all these other environmental things around the fact of this is a real situation I actually need to fight in. So I'm going to skip all that and get to, okay, if you actually need to fight, what are you fighting for? And how do you do it effectively? That includes the decision to get involved, what your goal is. Go into a little bit about pain versus damage. My favorite, which is the Brave Sir Robin defense, and the difference between running away and actually just running away and actually running towards safety, which is pretty significant, really. So
if I say run away, do we have to do the entire Monty Python canon?
Well, I do enjoy that. Shrubbery.
See, it happens.
Yeah, I know, doesn't it?
You break the seal. You say one thing, and bam.
There you go. Well, Monty Python is one of the most important social movements that I grew up around.
Well, tell me about the decision to get involved. What's the issue there? Because to me, it's like, I don't know. Why wouldn't I, or why wouldn't I? I don't know. I haven't really thought too much about it.
See, that's the important thing is you actually do need to think about it. So
that's what we call a lead-in.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And I started to run with it until you messed up my timing. The thing about the decision to get involved is if you are the target of an attack, typically you do not have time to make a decision. If you have time to make a decision, you are not defending yourself. In other words, something's happening, it's escalating, you're doing the monkey dance, whatever it is. In a situation like that, you have an option. You can think about, do I want to fight this guy or do I not? If you have time to think about that, you can just as easily leave. If you don't, if it's sort of, let's go with a predatory ambush kind of thing. You get cash out of the cash machine, you turn around and there's a guy in front of you and there's a knife coming. Right?
Hi, I'll be your robber this evening.
Yeah, or whatever, right? Those kind of situations, you don't have the ability to decide to get involved. It's been thrust upon you. And therefore, you have a different dynamic, right? Because it's starting off at, you're in a fight and you're probably losing. It's a really good in terms of a classical, it's you're defending yourself legally, you're covered, but on the other hand, you have to live through it, right? So that decision to get involved can be from is it thrust upon you or do you get to decide, which can help determine whether it's really self-defense or not if you're the target. However, other things happen. I mean, you're not always the target, right? Sometimes there's people that you need to or want to defend. So, there's all kinds of situations where somebody could walk across a violent encounter that's in progress and you see two people fighting. You have no idea who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, because you didn't see it start. What do you do? And how do you get involved in that kind of a situation, right? So everything from, do you physically intervene? Do you go to a safe place and call 911? Do you, yell, hey, somebody called the cops? Do you, there's a lot of ways to respond to that kind of thing. One of the most dangerous ones is just jumping in, because if you didn't see the encounter start, and frequently it's kind of like penalties in professional sports, right? The guy that does the initial foul of whatever kind it is, the refs don't always see it, but they always see the retaliation. You know how that is? It's kind of the initial movement sort of draws your eye, but it doesn't register. The response is what registers. Well, you could easily misinterpret something that you see happening.
Let me give you an example. Andy, one of the black belts in the dojo, he and his wife were walking out of the store, and there was a woman and a man, and they were in an altercation. And I mean, fists were flying and words were going, and it was going off. And it turns out that if I've got the story still correctly, Andy's wife came up and pulled out a can of mace and pointed it at the guy and said, "You better explain yourself," and that's how she intervened to break it up. And it turns out that I believe the woman was actually a street person who was actually trying to hit the guy up, and he told her to get lost, and she got violent and started banging on him. And so when Catherine came up, she assumed that the man was the aggressor, which in fact it wasn't the instance.
Right, and that's the danger exactly. If you didn't see it happen, and I mean all of it, right, then you really don't know what's going on, which we can probably talk about in another podcast of how to articulate yourself while you're fighting. But setting that aside, absolutely, that's a really good example of walking across a scene and not really knowing what's happening, which leads to what choice do you make about getting involved? And it's really a valuable thing to think about. What are situations you should get involved in? What are situations you shouldn't? And what are your options? Because when you're under adrenaline, you stop thinking as clearly, right? When you get me in a pretty serious adrenaline rush just from coming across something that's violent and in progress, even if it has nothing to do with you. I mean, that's not that uncommon unless you're around it all the time.
And let me make this really clear. We're coming from the position of a citizen, not a police officer whose job is to intervene in the domestic dispute.
Right.
Which they do not want to do, because, as soon as you put the cuffs on somebody, the spouse attacks you. That's the worst case. But those are not situations. Every cop I know does not like going to domestics. That's like the worst thing to have to do, other than maybe scraping somebody after an accident. Well, anyway, and of course that whole procedure and vignette and everything has precipitated and grown, and it's now part of legend and lore. It doesn't make any difference. There's some truth to it, but the fact of the matter is that we, where we sit, have an option to get involved or not and get involved. Police don't. It's their job.
Yeah, exactly. Right. When I was working in the stadium, I couldn't just ignore something. I had to actively get involved in some way. Law enforcement officers have a greater discretion with that, right? But
what I want to underline, the fact is that you and I can walk away.
Absolutely. Right. As can most of our listeners, right? But some people, if it's your job, you can't.
Right. I just wanted to make that delineation.
No, great point. Great point. Definitely need to clarify that. If you're going to get involved now, the next obvious topic is, what's your goal, right? Are you trying to stop a threat? Are you trying to escape to safety? Are you trying to restrain somebody from hurting another person? Are you trying to, whatever it is, right? Knowing what your goal is really, really important, because if you don't, before the fists start flying, or at least while you're still able to think clearly, determine what it is you need to do, it gets really dysfunctional. So for example, somebody is attacking me and I'm a grappler. I'm an MMA kind of guy. I've got some experience, right?
Let me back it up and let's do it this way, Lawrence. So we basically got escape, restraint, and stop. I mean, that's your three options.
There's more options than that, but those are the kind of the three big examples, I would say.
Okay, so I'm the MMA guy.
Yeah.
And I come up on the same instance that we just talked about with Andy and Catherine.
Right.
Okay, so now he has an option, which is to walk away, to try to restrain somebody, or to make whatever's happening stop.
Right, and there's multiple ways of doing that, obviously. Right.
Okay.
I mean, you can stop it by yelling at somebody. I mean, I don't know how many fights I broke up at the stadium just by yelling at people. I had a uniform on and a radio and stuff like that, right, which helps. It brings some a little bit of authority to the yell. But I mean, I remember a situation where you at the YMCA yelled out to a bunch of guys who were starting a fight that made them. You want to tell that story?
I've told it before, but it was just I was waiting to teach my class, and I'm standing there in my gi and my obi. And this fight erupts on the basketball court, and I'm just watching it through the glass, and it starts getting going on, and it's pretty good. And I'm just standing there watching it, going, "Heck, free lessons." And somebody says, "Wow, somebody ought to do something," and everybody in the hallway turns and looks at me. So.
Well, you look so authoritarian and scary, hey, he's got a black belt on.
Well, I mean, that was the thing, is they turned to the authority on violence in their mind. And of course, I walked over and opened up the gym door and yelled as loud as I could, "Hey, the front desk just called the cops." Poof, they were gone.
Yeah. So you stopped the fight without ever physically intervening. Or
of course, these people thought I was going to wade in waist deep, and go all Bruce Lee on them.
Well, right, which would have been a lose-lose because there were a bunch of teenagers. I mean, can you imagine the headline of karate black belt beats up these poor defenseless kids?
How about karate black belt gets beat down by tribe of teenagers?
Well, that could happen too, right?
Yeah.
Either way, it's all bad. So, point is, and I think that makes it actually.
But an MMA fighter standing there, let's just say, I mean, because we have an icon of an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Pretty strapped, pretty yoked, probably got a T-shirt that says, camp kill on it, or
tap out or something.
Or something like that, you know what I mean? And if that dude says, "Hey, what are you doing?" and is taking a couple steps towards that altercation that we just described,
right,
isn't that a certain type of authority?
Oh, absolutely. Right. I mean, just being young, fit, big dude gets some attention, right? The place I was going to go to with the MMA thing is, if you're trying to stop an attack, can you drive somebody to the ground and pin him down to stop the attack? Well, sort of, but all of a sudden it's not self-defense anymore. That's the problem.
I stopped the beating. I stopped the beating.
Which is okay until the point that once the threat has been disabled, if you continue to hold the threat down, you're now kidnapping somebody, which is felony. Just saying.
Well, I mean, okay, so let's say I throw the guy to the ground, I hold him down, and he's like, "Let me up, I'm going to kill you." Oh, I'm going to hold him down.
That's a different story, right? Because it's still a threat.
What if he says, okay, I'm done?
Now, that's when you start getting into, the mechanics of the individual situation, right? In a situation where two people are fighting, you take one of them to the ground, you're holding him down there, and going back to the domestic thing, let's pretend it wasn't some street person and some other guy, right?
Yeah, okay.
Let's pretend it's husband and wife or something. What are the odds that whichever one you hold down, the other ones start kicking you in the head?
Well, about 101%.
Yeah. So first off, it's not actually stopping the threat, right? Secondly, you can't escape to safety if you're pinning somebody down, because by definition, you've immobilized yourself and the other person. So the only thing that holding somebody down is going to do is restrain them. If you don't have a legal right to restrain somebody, you're starting to get into pretty dangerous territory. Now, if this is drunk on Uncle Albert at the family picnic or something, he's probably not going to press charges, and Aunt Bertha or whatever is going to be very thankful that you held the guy down and kept him from doing something dumb until he regained his wits, right? That's cool. But doing the same thing in a Safeway parking lot at night, not necessarily the best tactic, unless you happen to be the Safeway security guard and you've got backup or whatever. You see what I'm saying? So it's all situational as what's the right thing to do. You can stop the threat with your mouth. You can stop the threat with your fist, with your gun, with your whatever, depending on the appropriate level of force. But make sure that whatever it is that you're trying to do gets you towards your goal. So if your goal is to escape and you drive somebody to the ground and put them in a lock of some kind, that's really not facilitating your goal of escape. If your goal of escape is to get away and you tie up with a guy and, with a flurry of fists or whatever, that's also not advancing your goal of escaping. Because, I'm not trying to say anything about grapplers versus strikers. I'm trying to say, if your goal is to escape, then get the hell out of there. Don't tie up with the person unless you absolutely have to facilitate getting the hell out of there. You see what I'm saying?
Is it safe to say that all municipal, county, and federal law wants everybody to run away from everybody all the time?
Mostly yes. I mean, there are castle laws and some other nuances, but for the most part, if you have the opportunity to disengage, we talked about preclusion, right?
What's a castle law?
Castle law is certain circumstances when in your home or occasionally your place of business, you don't have to try to run away. Preclusion no longer applies. So if somebody, kicks your door in, comes at you with an axe, home invasion robbery or a gun or a machete or whatever, and you just shoot them, chances are if you're in an area with castle laws, you won't be charged with anything. Whereas if they don't have the castle law, and there's various legal terms around it. They just kind of call it castle laws generically. If you don't have that, if you just shoot the guy as soon as he comes in the door, you may be charged with murder, as opposed to if you get chased through the house a bit first and then shoot the guy, in which case it's clearly self-defense because you couldn't get away, right? That one of those kind of things. So if castle laws apply, and there's also stand your ground or hold your ground kind of laws, other nuances, but I'm lumping them all kind of in the same bucket. But except in those situations, and even then it's sometimes prudent, if you have the ability to get away, the law wants you to get away. Now, it could be that you have to protect, a pregnant woman or a small child or somebody who's in a wheelchair or whatever that can't escape, or you might be the one that's in that sort of situation where running is not an option. That's another exception to that. But if you have the ability to run away safely and it doesn't contribute to putting you in more harm, then yeah, the law pretty much always, at least in the United States, wants you to do that.
What about pain versus damage?
Yeah, so part of the whole thing, so fighting to the goal is, let's say my goal is escaping, right? One of the things that people who've never been in a real fight before don't really understand is that pain doesn't break you. It doesn't stop you from escaping or continuing to fight or continuing to restrain someone, whatever it is, right? It just hurts a lot. And so the example being punched in the face and getting a broken nose versus getting a serious concussion, right? Broken nose hurts, it bleeds, it's not fun. I've had enough of them. I actually had to have my nose surgically re-straightened. Okay, not good. You don't want that. But it
I think they did a fine. I think they did a fine job, Lawrence.
Why, thank you. Actually, quick sidebar. It was actually pretty cool. I had to have sinus surgery in order to make it so I could breathe and not die. And when I woke up from it, the guy said, "Hey, while I was in there, I straightened your nose back out because it was pretty messed up." And that's almost an exact quote. It's like the doctor's telling me this while I'm recovering from the anesthetic and totally out of it, and oh, wow, man, that was really cool of you.
Thanks, baby.
Yeah. But anyway, it was just kind of funny that the guy threw it in as a freebie. So that says something about how messed up it was before. But anyway, the difference between pain of, say, a joint lock versus damage if we're, broken limb or a dislocated joint or something, right? That's really important, especially if your goal is escape. But even if it's, let's flip it around to we were talking about earlier of restrain, right? If you're going to hold somebody down until the police arrive because they continue to be a threat or because it's, whatever the situation is appropriate, one of the things you may have to do is inflict pain to get the person to stop fighting. If you inflict damage, you're putting yourself in more of a precarious legal position unless you can really justify it. So, again, it works for you. It also works for the other guy.
Tell me about Brave Sir Robin and how he, I almost went into the Python thing again, but Brave Sir Robin, tease that out for me because, I got to know.
Okay. So, those who aren't Monty Python fans, or have seen Spam a lot, which is basically the same thing, is the Monty Python and the Holy Grail. There's a scene in there where you have Brave Sir Robin, and he has his minstrels with him, and his minstrels are singing about how brave he is and all these horrible things that he doesn't mind happening to him. And then he encounters the dreaded two-headed knight, and for seconds upon seconds holds his own, and then bravely turns his tail and flees. And the minstrels sing, this thing, and I'm not even going to try to sing it, but it's Brave Sir Robin ran away. He bravely ran away. When danger reared its ugly head, he nobly turned his tail, or he bravely turned his tail and fled. Blah blah blah. Right.
Well, hang on here, yeah. Lawrence. We've got the audio.
Brave Sir Robin ran away. No. Bravely ran away.
I didn't.
When danger reared its ugly head, he bravely turned his tail and fled. Yet Brave Sir Robin turned about.
I didn't.
See, they do a better job than you do.
Yes, they do. They're professionals. Don't try this at home. Okay, so you get the point. The knight running away is funny because he's a brave knight, right? Well, part of the challenge that people have is that they don't want to run away, especially, if you're younger, stronger, fit, you're black belt, or, you carry concealed weapon around all the time or whatever. You have some kind of ability to take care of yourself, defend people you care about. Running away seems wrong. I mean, it really does. And, it takes a bit to convince people that actually running away can be a really, really good tactic. Because let's face it, if there's no paperwork, you don't have to worry about lawsuits. You don't have to worry about jail. You don't have to worry about rehab. You don't have to worry about, hospitalizations and other really bad things happening. So, one of the things that I like to say is, and other people call it the Nike defense, right? Because you lace up your Nikes. Either way, running away is a very legitimate thing to do in a self-defense situation. And again, it gets back to what's your goal. If your goal is to escape, then running is a really darn good way to do that. You don't have to beat somebody down. You don't have to teach them a lesson. You don't have to win. You don't have to do any of these things that we would normally think about in those kind of situations, or in a tournament for that matter, because all you have to do is not be there. If you're not there, you can't get hurt and you can't lose.
Okay, so I'm running away. What's the difference between running away and running towards safety?
That is a critical distinction. So running away means you're just running and you're not thinking about it. Those who have really good situational awareness are always aware of escape routes, of places that could be potential ambushes, of where other people are, where vehicles are, things like that, and can think about what is going to get me to safety fastest. You especially see this with soldiers who've been deployed in areas of kind of, I'll call it guerrilla warfare, but Afghanistan, Iraq, that sort of thing, where you can be ambushed at any time and you need to find cover, you need to find concealment. If you can't find cover, you need to be able to move and protect yourself, and you're always looking for escape routes. Right?
Yeah, I always do, Lawrence. I mean, not that I make a big deal out of it and I run around and go, I've got my spidey senses tingling or anything,
Yeah.
But my basic policy is always, how can I be an animal that's being hunted? How can I get distance and hide from the threat? That's my whole thing. How do I get distance and hide from the threat? And so my son and I were in Lewiston, Idaho, and we were at a hotel, and it was like, great, we've got a door that goes outside across a lawn and down into the Columbia River.
Yeah.
There's an entire hillside of shrubbery and debris and gullies and washouts and logs, and it's like as soon as I clear that lawn, I'm down in that gorge, and no one's going to find me.
Yeah.
I mean, and
I will point out, by the way, you said shrubbery.
Yes, God, it's just turned into a Monty Python thing. But my point is that it took me about 10 seconds to just kind of walk over to the other side of the room, open the door, take a look, and go, okay, got it. And then I was good for the rest of the trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, people think about, I think you might have been...
And I'm not paranoid.
Well, no, but you're prepared. You're smart. People don't think about escape. I mean, one of the things, I think you were at that seminar that I did where I asked people how many escapes are from the room, and a few people noted the number of doors, a few people added the windows to it. Nobody thought about the sheetrock wall. Nobody, you know, you don't have to go through a designed portal. You can create your own.
Hulk smash.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you know, 18 on center, you know, you can get through that if you had to, especially if someone's shooting at you, right? So, you know, it really pays to have good situational awareness and just, you know, common attention to what's going on around you, because that allows you to go, oh, I remember that 3 blocks over and a block to the right was, you know, a 24-hour, you know, like a 7-Eleven or something where there's a bunch of people. And if I needed to run, I could run there because it's a public place and there's, you know, there's phones there, there's witnesses, there's video cameras and et cetera, et cetera. You know, that you may never need to use it. Most of the time, if you have good situational awareness, you actually don't need to use it. But it gives you an opportunity to actually do something that's planned as opposed to just reacting. Because if you just flee, that doesn't necessarily keep anybody from chasing you, right? And there's, you know, you can use fences, you can use cars, you can use buildings, you can use all kinds of stuff to form barriers to get away. In fact, Mark McYoung wrote a book, Street E&E, which is an entire book on how to run away effectively. And, you know, if Mark Animal McYoung writes about running away, it sort of makes it a legitimate self-defense tactic, in my mind.
Absolutely. Lawrence, I think we've covered it, except for one thing. And we're gonna throw this in here, that the previous information is for entertainment purposes only. We are not attorneys. This does not constitute legal advice. And if you find yourself in a situation, you should consult an attorney. You should not use this podcast as legal advice. So,
absolutely. This podcast is worth exactly what you paid for it, which is nothing. So, but seriously, you know, we are talking a lot of different aspects of self-defense, and really, it varies jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and please find out what the law is where you live, find out what the right things are to do where you work, and be safe.
And be well.
The Little Black Book of Violence. What every young man needs to know about fighting is a book you should own. The Little Black Book of Violence will arm you with the knowledge and good sense to make good choices in bad situations. Somebody insulting your favorite sports team is worlds apart from an off-his-meds lunatic. There is a gray area in between these two worlds where hard and fast rules do not always apply. The Little Black Book of Violence is a martial arts bestseller you should own. Buy it today at Amazon.